Hey everyone, this is CMYK here. Over the last year and a half I've been learning how to create my own trading cards game. And today I will give you a quick overview of what I want it to be. Then I will show you the card making workflow I've been using. Because when people think about card game, they usually focus on the cards themselves. I've been working on my trading card game for quite a while now, and it took a lot of experimentation to figure out how to design cards that actually work. My goal was to create a game with a lot of strategy and depth, while keeping it fast and easy to play. I wanted players to have fun without tracking dozens of different values on paper, and I also wanted the matches to stay relatively short, around 20 minutes max. And I wanted the game to be as fair as possible. I will explain the game mechanics and design decisions behind them in another video. Today I want to focus on the tools and workflow I use to create the cards themselves. From the beginning I knew my cards would need to contain a lot of information. I wanted them to have different elements and categories that affect gameplay. Each card also needed stats, a bit of lore, and some kind of special ability. Some cards can evolve into others, so I needed a way to show those connections as well. To keep the game simple, I also decided that every card should have a dice associated with it. And of course the artwork had to remain the main visual focus. That's a lot of information to fit onto a small card. After several redesigns and plenty of trial and error, I finally found a layout that worked. Once I had that, I started looking for ways to make the cards feel more professional. And before we dive deeper into that, let's start with the software. There are countless websites and dedicated tools for creating playing cards. I've tried many of them over the years. The problem is that every tool seemed to have some kind of limitation. Sometimes it was the canvas size, sometimes it was the number of elements I could use, other times it was colors, fonts, shapes, backgrounds, or even the card back. There was always something that got in my way. Long story short, none of these tools allowed me to create the cards exactly the way I imagined them. That changed when I decided to build everything from scratch in GIMP. I approached card design the same way I approach game development, and before we continue, I should mention one important limitation. At the time of recording, GIMP doesn't support the CMYK color profile by default. In simple terms, this means that printed colors may look slightly duller than they do on your screen. There are plugins that can help with that, but I never found one that I really liked. So if you have access to another graphics editor that supports CMYK and basic object manipulation, it may be worth using that one instead, especially if you are planning on printing your cards. That being said, GIMP is free, and in my experience the color difference wasn't significant enough to make me switch to another tool. With that out of the way, let's talk about layers. Layering is the technique used by artists and game developers to create complex visuals from many separate pieces. What looks like a single object is actually made from multiple layers stacked on top of each other. Each layer can be edited, moved, replaced, or adjusted without affecting the others. This makes the whole process much more flexible. Game developers use this technique all the time. For example, a character in your favorite video game might have separate layers for armor, weapon, clothing, and effects. Instead of drawing each possible combination by hand, artists can simply mix and match the individual pieces. And we can use exactly the same idea when designing cards. Every unique part of the card gets its own layer. To keep everything organized, I group related layers together. Inside those groups are smaller subgroups containing images and text. If that sounds confusing, don't worry, we will go through that step by step. If you ever work with folders on a computer, which I imagine everyone did, it's basically the same concept. One thing I strongly recommend is proper naming. Without it, the project became a complete mess surprisingly fast. Looking at my source file, you can see that everything is divided into three main sections: card front, card back, and background. We will talk about the safe area and background later. For now, let's focus on the front of the card. When I expand the card front group, you can see several smaller groups. Each one contains a specific part of the finished card, and the first one is text. This contains all the text elements and values. Everything is clearly named, so if I need to change one specific piece of text, I can find it immediately and tweak it. In the next group we got stat images. This is where I choose which dice and stat icon appear on the card. Below that are containers. These are the visual frames behind the text and icons. In game development I usually call these the containers, so that's the name I kept there. Feel free to call them whatever makes sense to you, but make sure to name it something that you are gonna immediately recognize. The next group handles rarity. It contains different star layouts and card borders that can be switched between while designing the card. And there is a useful tip. Not every element needs to stay on its own layer forever. Sometimes it makes sense to merge layers together. For example, my health icon, armor icon and dice icon will always stay in the same place. This same applies to the rarity stars and card borders. Since their position never change, keeping them as separate layers only creates more work and increases the chance of making a mistake. So in those cases, I merge them together. The goal isn't to create as many layers as possible, but to create as many layers as necessary. Everything should stay flexible, but also practical. Let's continue with the rest of the card structure. The next group is shadows. At the moment, it's just a simple shadow around the edges of the card. It doesn't do much, but it adds a little bit of depth and helps the card feel less flat. Below that are the elemental backgrounds. Each element in my game has its own visual style and background. As I'm recording this video, I'm actually missing few because I recently added new elements and categories and haven't had time to actually design them yet. If there is enough interest, I might make a separate video showing how I created those backgrounds. Believe it or not, designing them is one of the more difficult parts of the whole process. And finally, we get to the most important visual element of my cards, the artwork. This is the part players will notice first, so it needs to stand out. To keep things organized, I sorted artwork into categories based on gameplay mechanics and card types. That way, I can quickly find what I need without digging through hundreds of layers. The last major group contains the border backgrounds, and these are the colored edges that frame the card. I keep them separate from the rest of the design because they are used for both the front and back side of the card. Essentially, each color has its own layer and it reflects the rarity of the card together with the stars. This way I can quickly switch between them while designing. For my cards, I needed to combine several different pieces of information. I had to show the card's elements, rarity, stats, ability and flavor text while still leaving enough room for the artwork. Finding the right balance wasn't easy. It took a lot of experimentation and more than half a year of adjustments before I was happy with the results. But once the system was finished, creating new cards became much easier. And more importantly, the cards started looking professional both on screen, but mainly in print as well. If this workflow helps, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I have more game design and tabletop development content planned for the future. And if you are watching this video in the future, well, there is a good chance those videos are already available on my channel, so go ahead and, well, take a look. But hey, now let's take a look at the rear side of the card. Every card needs one, and mine are no exception. Compared to the front, the back is much simpler. When I open the card back group, there are only a few elements inside. First is the outer border. Then there is shadow layer to add a little bit of depth, and finally there is the art along with some small amount of text. My current plan is to create a different card back for each expansion. Each one should feature artwork from different regions of the world of Aldenor, and if I wasn't planning on doing that, I would probably keep the entire backside as a single layer. But by separating the artwork, I can easily swap it later without redesigning everything. And just like before, the background is stored separately to keep the structure clean and easy to manage. So that's the visual side of things. Now let's talk about making the cards printable. Since I already mentioned the color profiles, I'm not gonna spend much time on them again. Just remember that RGB and CMYK can produce slightly different results when printed. So instead, let's talk about the size. Because the first thing you need to decide is actually the card size, and you need to decide about that before we even start with designing. And that's because unless your entire design is built using vector graphics, resizing anything later can become a nightmare. My cards use the standard poker card size. That's 63 by 88mm or 2.5 by 3.5 inches. At 300 dpi, that works out to be roughly 745 by 1040 pixels. But that's not actually the size of my canvas, is it? Because we also need something called a safe area and bleed area. Remember when I said we would come back to that? this is where it becomes important. Through the video, you probably noticed that I have some guides on my screen. The innermost guides mark the area where the actual card ends. No important text or artwork should ever cross those lines. Outside of that is another set of guides. This represents the physical edge of the printed card. Everything beyond that edge will be cut away during production. And the space between these two guides is called the safe area. In theory, that area should survive the cutting process. In practice, small variations can happen when the cards are trimmed. That's why the safe area usually contains only background graphics or solid color. If a tiny part gets cut off, nobody is gonna notice. And yes, every professionally printed card works this way. Actually, not only cards. Almost every single printed product works this way. Cards, posters, books, flyers, packaging, pretty much all of it. And now you know the secret. Outside of the card edge is another area that's called the bleed area. This extends all the way to the edge of the canvas. The bleed gives the printer some room for alignment and cutting. Without it, tiny cutting differences could leave unwanted white edges around the card. You may also notice that my safe area isn't perfectly symmetrical. It's slightly narrower at the top and bottom and a little wider on the sides. That was deliberate choice. I needed every bit of extra space I could get. My cards contain a lot of information and I wanted all of it to remain easy to read. I never wanted players to feel like they need a magnifying glass just to understand the card. Good game design should communicate information quickly. Ideally, a player should understand the important parts of a card in less than a second. That's a design rule I follow not only for cards, but for all my tabletop and computer games as well. And if it means having my card a little bit asymmetrical, well, so be it. I could talk about that for another 10 or 20 minutes, but honestly, that's a topic for another video, because we should talk about exporting the cards and preparing them for print. The exact process depends on the printing company you are working with. Choosing the right printer is topic worth yet another video as well, so I won't go too deep into that today. What matters is understanding what format your printer expects. Most companies use one of two approaches. In both cases, PDF is usually the standard format. That said, some companies also accept PNG files. In fact, the printer I've been using recently works perfectly fine with PNGs, and that saves quite a lot of time. The first approach is simple. Each card is exported as its own file. The card back is then exported separately as well and clearly marked so the printer knows which side belongs where. Sometimes you will also need to provide a spreadsheet or text file listing all the card names and quantities. Other printers handle quantities differently. In some cases, you simply include multiple copies of the same file. The second approach is to place all cards into a single document. Sometimes the file alternates between front and back sides. Sometimes it only contains front sides with a single backside design included separately. Again, every printing company has its own workflow. Some want quantity information in separate files, others expect duplicate pages for cards that need multiple copies. The important thing is to ask before preparing your files. It can save you a lot of time and frustration later, trust me. Exporting cards from my GIMP project is actually very straightforward. Once a card is finished, I simply export it. If I need PDF, I add .pdf to the file name when using the export as menu as you usually do in GIMP. If I need PNG file, well, I export it as PNG instead. After that, I organize the files however the printer requires. Sometimes that means sorting them into folders, and sometimes it means combining them into PDFs with some other tools. And sometimes it means uploading them directly through an online order system. The exact method doesn't matter too much. The important part is having a clean and consistent source file that makes exporting quick and painless. And honestly, that's one of the biggest advantages of this workflow. Because once the structure is built, creating new cards becomes extremely fast. Every element already has its place, you don't have to copy anything, you are just adding new and new art, new and new stats, building more cards and exporting them. And if you ever need to make a change later, it's much easier than rebuilding each card from scratch because you already have the source file and you can just make a slight change and export a new card. Anyway, coming up with the system took a lot of experimentation. There were plenty of failed ideas along the way, but looking back, I am glad I invested the time, because It helped me create cards that look professional, stay readable, and are easy to maintain as the game grows. So if you are working on your own card game, I hope some of these ideas help you to avoid mistakes I made. And maybe they will save you a few months of trial and errors as well. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider leaving a like and subscribing. If you are working on your own card game, leave a comment telling me what's the biggest challenge you overcame so far. I love hearing stories of people getting creative and finding solutions. There are more game development, tabletop design, trading card game, and gaming videos coming in the future. And if those videos are already out by the time you are watching this, feel free to check out the channel and you will surely find something you enjoy. As always, thank you for your time and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.